Welcome to the Human Archive. If you enjoy original science fiction stories about humanity finding its place among the stars, subscribe and join us for the next one. Now, let's begin. A Human Archive story. Courtesy. Deputy Games Commissioner Jethra Amal had spent 32 years making certain the Galactic Games ran smoothly. She considered this noble work. Other people considered it obsessive. Both were correct. Jethra kept a printed rulebook on her desk despite the existence of a fully indexed digital version that updated itself automatically. She knew the location of every emergency medical station in the central arena. She personally inspected athlete dining facilities before opening day. She had once delayed an entire qualification round because a starting platform was 3 millimeters outside construction tolerance. The games happened once every 5 years. Hundreds of worlds watched. If something went wrong, Jethra preferred that it be someone else's fault. This was why she disliked the participation committee. Committees manufactured shared responsibility, which was merely another way of making certain nobody could be blamed efficiently. The final meeting had been in progress for nearly 2 hours when Commissioner Thalrin raised humanity. "They possess no qualification history," he said. Jethra looked across the circular chamber. "Because they have never attended. That is generally how lack of qualification history occurs." Several commissioners made soft sounds of amusement. Jethra did not. Humanity had entered the Concord 6 years earlier. That was a very short time by Galactic Games standards. Some participating species had records extending back more than 2 centuries. Thalrin continued. "The next games are only 18 months away. Earth has not entered any recognized interspecies qualifying circuit. I suggest waiting until the following cycle and have the newest full Concord member watch from home. They may observe. That is diplomatic language for excluding them." Thalrin shifted uncomfortably. Jethra tapped the biological forecast on her desk. The human profile was unremarkable by interspecies athletic standards. The model rated human strength as respectable, top speed as ordinary, and aerobic capacity, balance, grip, and reaction time as good. Nothing looked exceptional. Most established game species possessed at least one obvious physical advantage. The Orcs came from a heavy gravity world and produced absurdly powerful strength athletes. Sethari runners moved on Digitigrade legs that made them nearly impossible to challenge in pure sprinting. Several arboreal species dominated vertical events. Aquatic competitors left terrestrial species embarrassingly far behind in water. Humans appeared competent at many things and exceptional at none. That made the decision easy. "Give Earth courtesy status," Jethra said. Thalrin looked at her. 12 positions. Enough for representation across disciplines. You do not expect them to qualify for finals. I expect them to enjoy themselves." The proposal passed. Jethra sent the official invitation personally. Earth accepted 11 hours later. Then the questions began. The first request was reasonable. Complete competition rules. Jethra approved it. Then came historical footage from the previous 40 games. She approved that too. The next message requested surface friction coefficients for every approved competition floor. Then environmental specifications, equipment dimensions, atmospheric pressure, projectile tolerances, scoring formulas, legal footwear limits, hydration rules, permitted fabrics, restrictions on grip compounds, definitions of prosthetic assistance, regulations governing pre-event warming devices, and one question that required a 3-page legal clarification regarding whether an athlete could intentionally release a climbing hold and catch a lower one if both remained inside the designated route. Jethra read the final request twice. Commissioner Thalrin leaned over her shoulder. "They are taking the invitation seriously." Jethra filed the clarification. "That is preferable to not taking it seriously." 18 months later, she would remember saying that, frequently, the human trials. Earth did not select its Galactic Games team. Earth auditioned for it. Jethra discovered this after receiving the 63rd technical question. She opened a direct channel to the human delegation office. A tired man appeared on the screen surrounded by data panels. "Deputy Commissioner. What exactly are you doing?" He hesitated. "Training." "I assumed that." "Testing too." "Testing what?" "Everybody." That answer proved inconveniently literal. Earth had opened qualification trials across dozens of existing sports. Javelin athletes were attempting arc cast. Baseball pitchers were attempting arc cast. Cricket bowlers had submitted applications until someone explained the projectile had to be thrown rather than bounced. Climbers were testing the vertical maze. Gymnasts were testing it too. So were obstacle racers. Wrestlers and judo competitors were learning Concord grapple scoring. Decathletes were attempting the apex trial. Triathletes were trying parts of it. A former military pentathlon champion had apparently submitted a time respectable enough to remain under consideration. Jethra stared at the human official. You have competitions where one athlete performs several unrelated events. Quite a few. Why? The human smiled. People like finding out who's annoyingly good at everything. Jethra made a note she did not intend to include in any official report. Earth had also built replicas, not approximations. Replicas. Human sports laboratories had manufactured standardized arc cast projectiles from published specifications. Several training centers had reconstructed portions of the vertical maze. One university had built an entire Regulation 3 Gates field after receiving the rule package. Jethra found footage. She expected chaos. Instead, she watched athletes fail repeatedly. A javelin thrower missed the moving arc target by 7 meters. A climber fell from a rotating transition and spent 10 minutes arguing with a coach about foot placement. A wrestler attempted a legal Concord grapple maneuver, was penalized for boundary position, reviewed the footage, and tried again. No one seemed discouraged. They treated failure as information, not humiliation. Jethra closed the archive. For the first time, she wondered whether 12 courtesy positions had been generous enough. They brought athletes. The human delegation arrived 6 days before opening ceremonies. Jethra met them at the athlete village. She had expected diplomats. She received Keely Donahue. Keely was 29, medium height, wiry rather than imposing, and carrying 3 pieces of fruit she had apparently taken from the dining hall before official meal service opened. Are those authorized? Jethra asked. Keely looked at the fruit. They were in a bowl. The dining facility is not open. The bowl was. Jethra decided immediately that she would need patience. Keely held out 1 fruit. Want one? No. Good, more for me. The rest of the team spread behind her. Zaid Armitage, the arc cast specialist, spoke rarely and spent most of the arrival briefing looking toward the equipment hall. Briani Matsuda did not remain present long enough for Jethra to evaluate her properly. Halfway through the orientation, someone said, "Where's Briani?" Jethra turned. The climber was 12 meters above the floor. She had somehow reached the upper curve of a decorative support arch. Human, Jethra called. Briani looked down. Yes. That is not competition equipment. I know. Come down. I'm checking the surface texture. You were specifically told not to climb structural decorations. Briani thought about this. Was that in the packet? Keely called upward, page 12. Oh. Briani came down. Tun Sokolov, the grappler, spent dinner trading food with an Orokai heavyweight and discovered too late that the orange paste on the alien plate was aggressively spicy. I'm fine, he said while his eyes watered. Keely handed him water. You're sweating. I'm an athlete. You're crying. Emotionally moved by interspecies friendship. At the far end of the table, Femi Adebisi closed his eyes. Can everybody stop talking while I eat? Nobody did. Jethra found herself liking them despite considerable effort. Then she watched their first official practice. The humans changed. Keely stopped joking. Coaches timed her transitions between stations. Zaid threw at reduced power while a biomechanics technician measured his hip angle. Briani repeated the same wall move 7 times because the 3rd foot placement was slightly slow. Tund practiced grip entries against 3 different partners. Femi ran measured laps around the warm weather track while recording splits in a small physical notebook. Corrections were constant. Nobody took them personally. Jethra watched Keely complete an obstacle segment, receive criticism from 2 coaches, and immediately do it again. The humans had arrived delighted to be invited. Jethra had seen newcomers before. Most spent their first games trying not to embarrass themselves. They deferred to established teams, copied familiar techniques, and treated the old metal powers as if history itself were another opponent. The humans did something else. They asked questions. They watched everybody. They traded notes with rivals at dinner, and then spent the next morning trying the things they had learned. Their coaches seemed almost offended by the idea that a useful technique should belong to one sport forever. That attitude made more sense once Jethra looked at the delegation biographies. Keely had changed sports twice before adulthood. Tund had trained in wrestling before judo, and then added unfamiliar rules for Concord grapple. Briani had arrived through climbing, gymnastics, and obstacle competition. Zaid's coaches included people from 3 different throwing disciplines. Even the specialists carried pieces of other sports with them. Earth had not sent 12 examples of a single human athletic tradition. It had sent 12 intersections. They had not arrived merely to attend. Faster is faster. The first event restored Jethra's confidence. Burst Run was brutally simple. Start, accelerate, finish. The Sethari were built for it. Their Digitigrade legs folded and released like springs. Their bodies stayed low during acceleration, and their long rear tendons returned energy with frightening efficiency. The human sprinter ran beautifully. Jethra knew enough athletics to appreciate that. His start was precise. His stride frequency remained high. He lost almost nothing through the middle phase. He finished 6th. The Sethari champion crossed the line so far ahead that the human broadcast team sounded delighted simply to have witnessed it. Jethra found this reassuring. Humans were good. The model had predicted good. Then came Titan Lift. The human entry was muscular enough to draw approving commentary. The Orcs looked as though someone had built an athlete out of structural support beams. The human placed 8th. The Orcs winner broke no record, but lifted enough mass that Jethra saw several human coaches stop talking. Cern Vekar approached Keely afterward. The defending Apex champion was taller than she was by nearly half a meter and much broader through the hips and legs. He had been charming to the human delegation since arrival, perhaps too charming. "Your people are very enthusiastic about finishing 6th, he said. Keely bit into an unauthorized piece of fruit. He ran a personal best. He still lost. So? Cern looked genuinely confused. Keely shrugged. You should see us when we finish first. Cern laughed. Jethra did too. For the moment, the biological models remained intact. Then Arccast began, the throw. Arccast had existed for 83 games. The rules were elegant. Athletes stood inside a marked throwing zone and launched a standardized sphere toward moving circular targets positioned at varying distances. Velocity, precision, and range all mattered. Strength helped, but control mattered more. The record had survived 11 games. Zaid Armitage watched the first 6 athletes without speaking. Most species use some variation of a powerful arm whip or forward push. One competitor rotated through the torso. Another species used 2 arms together. Zaid rolled his shoulders, then he began his approach. Jethra saw the difference before he released. His final step lengthened. The forward foot planted hard, his hips turned while his chest remained behind. For a fraction of a second, the human body appeared twisted against itself. Then the torso followed. The shoulder rotated back far enough that Jethra's own joint ached in sympathy. The arm came forward. Elbow, wrist, fingers. The sphere left his hand. It struck the center target. The arena display updated. Then stopped. Several officials leaned toward their consoles. Jethra opened the raw sensor feed. The velocity was wrong, not slightly wrong, ridiculously wrong. She stood. Recalibrate. The field crew checked the target array. Zaid waited, no complaint, no celebration. He adjusted one shoe. The sensor team reset. The referee signaled. Zaid threw again. This one was faster. It also struck closer to dead center. The crowd went quiet in the strange way huge crowds sometimes did when nobody yet understood whether they had seen something legal. The record fell by enough that the old mark suddenly looked historical. Jethra requested immediate biomechanical review. Slow-motion footage appeared on the official screen. A games analyst highlighted the motion. The analysis traced the motion from foot pressure through hip rotation, torso acceleration, shoulder stretch, elbow extension, wrist, and release. The projectile had not been accelerated by the arm alone. The human had turned almost his entire body into a sequence. Jethra watched the shoulder again. That joint is legal. The medical analyst beside her answered, apparently. Does it normally move that far? In him. A notification appeared. Formal protest filed. Jethra sighed. Of course, the protest. The protest came from the Talvar delegation. It was well written. Jethra appreciated that. The Talvar did not accuse Zaid of cheating. They argued that the extreme elastic loading visible in his shoulder might constitute biological kinetic assistance outside the intended movement standard. The phrase was clever. It was also nonsense. Jethra chaired the review personally. Zaid sat beside the human technical representative wearing the same competition shoes he had worn during qualification. Jethra had already been informed that he refused to change them once a tournament began. She found this irrational. She respected the consistency. Medical scans confirmed no implant, no powered brace, no hidden mechanism. His shoulder simply moved that way. The human biomechanist displayed footage of baseball pitchers, javelin athletes, cricket bowlers, handball players, and several other Earth sports. Jethra watched one pitcher throw a smaller ball at astonishing speed. How common is this? The biomechanist considered. The exact performance level, not common. The motion. Oh, humans throw things. That answer felt insufficient. The protest was denied. Jethra signed the ruling herself. Outside the review chamber, Cern and Keeley were watching Zaid's replay again. Cern winced. That looks painful. Keeley nodded. For me, yes. For him, apparently not. Zaid passed them on the way out. It hurts later. Then he kept walking. Cern watched him go. That is not reassuring. Keeley grinned. It wasn't meant to be. By the next morning, 6 delegations had requested rotational throwing analysis. The games were already adapting. Jethra approved every request. Humans had not broken the rules. If everyone else wanted to learn from them, that was exactly what competition was for. The vertical maze. Brianni Matsuda lost the opening section of the vertical maze badly. Jethra found this reassuring for almost 90 seconds. The upper course favored arboreal species with exceptional hanging endurance. Brianni moved quickly, but every sustained suspension cost her. The leading athlete, a long-limbed Vayathi climber, floated from hold to hold with infuriating ease. Brianni reached the first transition in 4th. Then the course changed. The vertical maze was not a wall. It was several movement problems welded together by someone who disliked athletes. The next section required a lateral jump to a rotating platform. Brianni hit it without slowing. A wall followed. She planted 1 foot high, drove through the leg, and mantled over the edge. The Vayathi leader used a slower pull-up motion. Brianni gained half a second. Then came the balance rail. She stopped moving like a climber. Her steps became light and fast, arms loose, torso correcting before visible wobble developed. Jethra remembered the human file, gymnastics. The next transition was a swinging bar over a drop. Brianni caught it, used the arc, released at the apex, landed against a sloped wall, and ran 3 steps before grabbing the next hold. Parkour. Jethra leaned forward. The Vayathi athlete still led entering the final quarter. Then Brianni stopped, only for a fraction of a second. Her eyes moved over the course. Everyone else had climbed toward the upper rotating hold. Brianni looked down. There was another bar below it. The legal route markers included both. She let go. The crowd shouted. Brianni dropped more than 2 meters. Her hands caught the lower bar. Momentum carried her beneath it. She swung once, released, and landed past an entire transition. Jethra stood. The move was legal. She knew because she had answered the human question about intentional lower hold releases 14 months earlier. Brianni crossed the finish less than a second ahead. The Vayathi champion reached her almost immediately afterward. Jethra prepared for a protest. Instead, the alien pointed toward the replay screen. Show me the drop. Brianni smiled. Yeah. Within minutes, they were discussing hand position. Jethra watched them. The games had become much less smooth than she intended. They had also become more interesting. 30 kilometers. Femi Adebisi began the horizon course as though he had somewhere else to be later. No dramatic start. No attempt to match the leaders. He settled into 7th. Jethra watched the first 5 kilometers from the timing platform. The leading runners opened a substantial gap. Human commentators sounded calm. Alien commentators sounded less charitable. At 10 kilometers, Femi remained 7th. At 15, 6th. Jethra opened his split data. The times were almost irritatingly consistent. Every hydration station, Femi took exactly the planned amount. Every cooling section, he used the available misting system for the same number of seconds. No wasted surge and no panic. One runner ahead began slowing. Femi passed. Another developed rising core temperature and reduced pace. Femi passed. At 20 kilometers, he was 4th. The leader, Kasserin, remained comfortably ahead. Kasser came from a dry world species known for long-distance movement and excellent heat tolerance. He was not fading, he was racing. At 24 kilometers, Kasser looked back. He had finally noticed the human. His pace changed. Jethra smiled. There. Adaptation. Kasser accelerated before Femi could close. Femi's coach said something over the legal communication channel. Femi did not immediately answer. Then he increased pace slightly. Not enough. Kasser remained ahead. At 27 kilometers, Femi began gaining again. The crowd realized it before Jethra did. The sound changed in waves along the course. Femi reached Kasser with less than 2 kilometers remaining. Kasser surged. Femi went with him. Both athletes were visibly suffering now. Femi's stride had shortened. Kasser's breathing vents flared with every cycle. They ran side by side into the final straight. Kasser had superior raw heat tolerance. Femi had spent years training to run fast after already running a very long way. He found another gear, not a miracle, a trained one. He crossed first by less than 3 seconds. Then he lay down on the recovery mat. A broadcast interviewer rushed toward him. "Femi, can you tell us what?" The human lifted one hand without opening his eyes. "Can I eat first?" The interviewer stopped. Femi's coach appeared with a recovery drink. Jethra laughed so hard she startled the official beside her. Now everyone was watching. Humanity stopped being merely charming somewhere between the second gold medal and the third formal equipment review. Not socially, competitively. Delegations began studying them. Throwing coaches changed warm-ups. Obstacle athletes practiced intentional dynamic releases. Endurance teams reviewed human split strategy. Jethra received requests for Earth training footage from half the games. The humans shared most of it. The sharing changed the atmosphere of the village. A Sethari sprint coach spent an hour with a human start specialist comparing first-step mechanics. Human endurance staff traded cooling data with dry world runners. Briani and the Vayathi champion argued cheerfully over whether her lower route drop was actually faster or merely more dramatic. Jethra passed the training hall late one evening and found athletes from 5 species clustered around a replay screen, while Zaid demonstrated hip position with a rolled towel instead of a projectile. Nobody was becoming less competitive. If anything, the opposite was happening. They were learning one another quickly enough to become more dangerous. Jethra had spent 3 decades protecting the games from chaos. She was beginning to suspect that some kinds of chaos were the reason the games mattered. This surprised several species. Keely did not appear surprised. "Sports people steal from each other constantly," she said. Jethra looked at her. "You call it stealing." "Borrowing with aggressive enthusiasm." Across the training hall, Cern Vekar was watching Keely practice weighted carries. Keely noticed. "You're spying." Cern folded his arms. "You are doing the same thing." Keely had spent the previous 20 minutes watching his sled technique. "Yes." "Then I guess we are both terrible people." Cern smiled. "You are becoming less terrible at the carry." "Thank you." That was not praise. I took it as praise. Their rivalry had sharpened. Cern no longer treated her like an interesting newcomer. He asked about human training. She asked about Orokai recovery. They lied occasionally about how tired they were. Jethra recognized this because athletes from every species did it. Keely found her later that evening in the official dining hall. She had 3 pieces of fruit. Jethra looked at them. "You understand food here is unlimited." "Yes." "Then why do you keep stealing it?" Keely frowned. "I'm not stealing it. You repeatedly leave before meal service." "I'm pre-eating." "That is not a recognized category." "It should be." Jethra walked away before becoming involved. Concord grapple. Tund Sokolov laughed until the referee called him onto the mat. Then he stopped. Jethra watched the change from the judge's platform. His semi-final opponent was stronger. The difference showed immediately. Tund secured an upper body grip and attempted to turn. The alien simply stopped him, then drove forward. Tund slid nearly to the scoring boundary. The human released before being forced out. He circled, tried lower. The opponent had already adjusted, wide stance, hands controlling Tund's shoulders. The second entry failed. Tund reset again. His opponent advanced more confidently this time. That was the mistake. Tund allowed the push. 1 step, 2. Then he turned. His hip moved out of the line. 1 foot hooked behind the opponent's ankle. The stronger athlete's momentum continued without him. He crossed the boundary. The final round was harder. Tund's opponent had learned. He kept the wider stance and denied the human's preferred level change. Tund spent nearly a minute achieving nothing. Then he changed grips, underhook body lock pressure. The opponent resisted the expected throw. Tund did not throw. He forced rotation, moved behind, dropped his weight, control score. The match ended without spectacle. Tund stood, smiled again, and offered his opponent a hand. The alien accepted. Then immediately said, "Rematch." Tund laughed. "After the games." "Agreed." Jethra checked the human medal count. Earth had become a competitive problem. 3 gates. 3 gates saved everyone from believing the humans could adapt instantly. Their first match was ugly. The game used 5 athletes per side and 3 elevated scoring gates that opened and closed according to possession changes. Players could pass, strike, or carry the ball for only a limited number of steps. The human team tried aggressive man defense. Their opponents exploited vertical passing and moved the ball over them repeatedly. Earth lost by 11. Keely watched the entire second half from the athlete section with both hands over her face. Jethra sat beside her. Your species appears mortal after all. Keely looked at her. Did you save that line? For several days. It was worth waiting. The next morning, the human team had changed. They stopped chasing individual opponents. They defended space. Their formation shifted as the ball moved. Screens appeared, followed by give-and-go passes and fast transitions. One set play looked suspiciously like something Jethra had seen in human basketball footage. Another resembled handball. A third involved a lateral kick pass that made the opposing coach immediately request the rulebook. Legal. By the semifinal, other teams had adjusted to the human zone. So Earth changed again. They mixed coverages, pressed selectively, used slower possession when leading. They did not win gold. They won bronze. The celebration afterward was louder than some species' championship ceremonies. Jethra found the human team in a pile near the sideline. "Third," she said. A player grinned up at her. "First medal in a sport we learned 18 months ago." Jethra could not argue with that. The numbers. 2 nights before the Apex trial, Jethra finally reopened the biological model. She had been avoiding it. The model had not failed. That was the irritating part. Average human strength remained exactly where the records predicted. Average human sprint performance remained ordinary. Average balance, reaction time, aerobic function, grip capacity, all correct. The problem appeared when Jethra overlaid elite athlete data. The curves widened. A lot. Zaid's throwing profile barely resembled a civilian baseline. Femi's aerobic efficiency sat far outside the population average. Brianni's strength-to-mass ratio and balance scores occupied another extreme. Human sport did not merely discover gifted individuals and send them to competitions. It found them early, then developed them. School programs, local clubs, universities, private coaches, national federations, professional leagues, sports medicine, biomechanics laboratories, video analysis, nutrition science, recovery protocols, and an enormous population competing in so many different sports that Jethra stopped counting. She opened a list of Earth endurance events. Marathon, 42 kilometers, reasonable enough. Ultramarathon, 50 kilometers, 100. 160. She closed the list. No useful answer waited farther down. A human development report described children entering gymnastics at 6, throwing sports in adolescence, strength programs, cross-training, specialization. Keely's file showed exactly that pattern. Gymnastics, track and field, combined events. She had spent most of her life learning how to be excellent without being the very best at any single component. The Apex trial had been designed for exactly that problem. For the first time, Jethra understood that humanity's lack of one obvious biological specialty was not a weakness the games could easily exploit. Humans had built entire sporting cultures around turning breadth into a specialty of its own. Jethra sat back. Her father's old bronze games pin rested in the drawer beside her. He had taken her to the 42nd Games when she was young enough to think every athlete was invincible. She remembered asking him how anyone became that good. He had answered, "They keep doing the thing after sensible people go home." At the time, Jethra thought he was joking. She opened Keely's training log. He may have understood humans perfectly. The Apex trial. The Apex trial filled the central stadium. Every Games had prestige events. This one was different. It existed specifically to frustrate specialists. The course began with a short sprint, then a heavy sled, precision projectile station, vertical obstacle, balance traverse, weighted carry, technical jump. Final endurance run. No species had a perfect body for all of it. Cern Vekar had won the previous Games because he was unusually versatile for an Orcs. He was also very, very strong. Keely stood in the starting lane talking continuously. Zaid stood beside the barrier. "You always talk this much." "Yes." "Why?" "Because if I stop, I think." "That seems dangerous." "Exactly." Cern overheard. "You were more annoying when nobody expected you to win." Keely looked at him. "That's incredibly rude." "Yes. It helped." "I know." The athletes moved to the line. Jethra took her official seat. The start signal sounded. The Sethari competitor exploded forward. Keely did not. She ran well, that was all. She entered the sled station in fifth. Cern arrived ahead of her, then destroyed her. The Orcs planted both feet, leaned into the harness, and drove the heavy sled down the track as though insulting it personally. Keely strained. Her face tightened. The sled moved. Not quickly. When she reached the end, Cern was already at the projectile station. She had lost more than 10 seconds. Jethra felt the human crowd quiet slightly. Keely grabbed the standardized sphere. Her first throw hit not center, good enough. The gate released. She gained 3 seconds on a competitor who missed. Then came the vertical obstacle. The Arboreal athlete moved through it fastest. Keely did not attempt Brianni's dramatic style. She climbed cleanly. No wasted motion and no fall. Fourth, exiting the section. Balance came next. Here she gained. Gymnastics lived in her feet. She crossed a rotating beam with 2 fast corrections and no stop. Third, weighted carry. Cern widened the gap again. Keely's shoulders sagged by the end. She dropped the weights in the legal zone and bent over briefly. Her coach shouted something. She straightened. Technical jump. Clean. Then the endurance run began. Cern led. Another competitor followed. Keely entered third. The crowd rose. Jethra did too. The mistake. Everyone expected Keely to catch Cern quickly. Cern had expected that as well. That was why he had changed his race. He had watched Femi, studied human pacing, asked Orcs coaches to model how much energy Keely would retain after the carry. Then he adjusted his own effort through the earlier sections. He had sacrificed a little time to preserve more for the run. The adaptation worked. Keely did not close. At the first kilometer marker, Cern still led comfortably. At the second, the gap barely changed. Keely's stride looked heavy. Her arms moved tighter than Femi's had during Horizon course. This was not a fresh runner. This was a combined event athlete carrying every previous station in her legs. Cern looked back once. He increased pace. Keely did not immediately respond. Jethra felt tension spread through the stadium. The course tilted upward. That changed things. Cern's heavier Orcs frame slowed slightly. Keely shortened her stride and increased cadence. The gap narrowed. Downhill, Cern regained some of it. His lower body stability let him descend aggressively. Flat section almost equal. Keely began using the terrain, not running one pace, choosing where to spend. Uphill she pressed. Downhill, controlled, flat held. Cern recognized it. He surged earlier than Jethra expected. Keely's face changed. She had to answer. She did. The gap stopped widening, then began shrinking again. The final kilometer contained one last technical obstacle before the finishing straight, a low barrier sequence. Turn, projectile gate. Finish. Cern reached the barriers first. Keely arrived seconds later. He cleared them well. She cleared them slightly faster. Now the crowd was no longer making separate sounds. It was one roar. Cern reached the throwing station. He took the sphere, breathing hard, planted, threw, hit, good shot, gate opening. Keely arrived. She grabbed the second projectile. Jethra remembered seeing her practice with Zaid the previous afternoon. He had stood behind her saying very little. Foot. Keely adjusted. Hip. Again. Stop throwing with your shoulder first. I'm tired. You'll be more tired tomorrow. Now she was. Keely planted. Her hip began the rotation, torso followed, shoulder, arm. The movement was not Zaid's, nothing like it, but the sequence was there. The projectile struck near center. Her gate opened. Cern was already running. Keely went after him. The last straight was short, too short for strategy. There was no pacing left and no technical sophistication. Only the run remained. Cern had the lead. Keely gained half a step, then another. Cern drove harder. Keely's face twisted. They crossed beneath the final arch almost together. The stadium display took less than a second. It felt longer. Humanity first by 2.1 seconds. Keely continued 3 steps beyond the line, then collapsed onto the track, not gracefully. She rolled onto her back and started laughing. Cern stopped with both hands on his knees. He looked at the board, then at Keely, then back at the board. Keely raised one hand from the ground. You said something about 6th place. Cern closed his eyes. The crowd around Jethra exploded. Cern walked over. He stood above Keely. When is the next one? Keely looked up. 5 years. Too long. Come to Earth. Why? Hill training. Cern looked suspicious. Is that enjoyable? Keely grinned. No. Cern offered his hand. She took it. The medal table. Humanity did not win the Galactic Games. Jethra was grateful for that. She suspected Earth would have become unbearable immediately. The final medal table placed them 3rd overall. 3rd on their first appearance, with 12 courtesy athlete positions. The Sethari still owned pure sprinting. The Orcs remained dominant in maximum strength. Aquatic species humiliated humans in the water. Several reaction events produced results so far beyond human neuromuscular speed that the Earth commentators simply applauded. But humanity won Arc Cast, Vertical Maze, Horizon Course, Apex Trial. They medaled in Concord Grapple, took bronze in 3 gates, collected enough smaller placements across mixed events to push themselves near the top of the standings. The human delegation celebrated third as though someone had handed them the galaxy. What stayed with Jethro was not the medal count. It was how badly the humans had wanted events they had lost. Their sprinter had spent an hour after finishing 6th talking with the Sethari champion about starts. The Titan lift athlete had asked the Orcs winner to explain foot position. The 3 gates team, bronze medals still hanging around their necks, were already arguing about how they would defend the vertical pass next time. They did not seem to divide the games into victories worth remembering and losses worth forgetting. Jethro understood then why the courtesy invitation had gone wrong in a way no performance model could have predicted. The committee had assumed humans would arrive to demonstrate what their species already was. Humans had arrived to find out what else they could become. Flags everywhere, people singing, Tund carrying Femi despite Femi repeatedly demanding to be put down. Brianni standing on a railing she was not supposed to climb. Zaid finally changing his shoes. Jethro found Keely near the podium. The human captain had the apex medal around her neck and 2 pieces of fruit in one hand. "Third," Jethro said. Keely beamed. "Third. You are very pleased." "Third on our first try." "Yes." Keely bit into the fruit. "We're going to be unbearable next time." Jethro believed her. The Games Council met 2 months later. They revised the performance model. Average biological data remained useful. Elite variance received its own category. Training depth became a formal variable. Cross-disciplinary development was added to species assessments. Arc Cast coaches across the Concord began studying rotational kinetic chains. Several worlds launched new combined event programs. Human coaches received invitations. Alien coaches went to Earth. Cern Vekar accepted Keely's offer. He later sent Jethro a message consisting entirely of a photograph. Cern stood halfway up a muddy hill in rain. Keely was farther ahead. The caption read, "This planet is bad. Jethro saved it, for professional reasons." The Games Council also removed one phrase from future participation rules, courtesy delegation. Jethro suggested the change herself, not because courtesy had become undesirable, because she no longer wanted to classify a species competitively before anyone had bothered to ask what that species did for fun. Epilogue. Qualification required. 5 years later, Jethro sat in another participation meeting. Her hair had begun showing silver near the temples. Her printed rulebook had become even thicker. The old bronze spectator pin from the 42nd Games rested beneath one hand. A younger commissioner opened humanities application, then frowned. They entered 27 disciplines. Jethro continued reading another file. They have more. More athletes. More sports. The commissioner scrolled. How many sports do humans have? Jethro remembered tracks, pools, climbing walls, football fields, basketball courts, wrestling mats, rowing courses, ice rinks, gymnasiums, mountains, deserts. People voluntarily running 100 kilometers because 42 apparently did not answer the question strongly enough. I stopped asking. A notification appeared on her desk. Earth had submitted 3 proposals for demonstration events. The younger commissioner leaned closer. Jethro opened the first. Team obstacle relay. She closed her eyes. Problem? The commissioner asked. Jethro touched her father's old games pin. No. She authorized the proposal for review. This time, nobody had invited humanity as a courtesy. They had qualified the ordinary way now, through results everyone in the room understood. Jethro found that reassuring. The humans had not become unbeatable in 5 years. They had simply become part of the standard everyone else prepared against, copied from, complained about, and tried very hard to defeat.